Hello and welcome to the Hedonistic Way at Midday show. I'm Renee Main and I am really excited to be here with you guys. So this today's show is all about sex. And what I asked you guys to do was to message me to send in your questions, right? So, what questions do you have? And I am here to answer them for you. So, I have got an amazing list of questions here that I will make my way through. And if you've got any questions, then please let me know, and I'm more than happy to answer them. So I will check for any questions as I continue. But I have got a whole list of questions that that I will be answering today. Now, before I really get into answering those questions, is I did want to say that that 43% of women struggle with some aspect of their sexuality or sex, whether it be desire, whether it be sex itself, arousal, orgasm. There is so much shame that we hold around our sexuality and desire and pleasure. And the ripple effect that that has on our life is absolutely huge, right? Because research shows that the effect that this has on our relationships, our well-being, our happiness, and also our health is really, it's important that we address this in our life, right? Because the ripple effect and the effect that this has can be huge, and it does ripple out into all areas of our life, right? So some of the questions that I have, and something just kind of was underneath there for me. So I do feel to say, to speak to men as well, is I talk about the women in this 43%. However, if we also address, this goes beyond gender, right? Is because there are huge, like erectile dysfunction, premature ejaculation, so this affects men as well. So I really wanted to give you guys some real insight today as to not just like why it happens, but what you can do, right? To give you stuff that you can really walk away with that helps you no matter what is happening within your sex life and sexuality. Now, Carl Jung says that our sexuality has nothing to do with sex and everything to do with our psyche, okay? And that is really the approach that I have when I do this work with sensuality and sexuality and spirituality. And that's why somatic kink is such a beautiful experience, because it's something that happens within the mind, body, and spirit, and bringing those things into alignment. Okay, so what questions will I be answering today? I'm going to tell you the questions that have been sent in to me, okay? And if you've got any other questions, then please feel free to ask them. Okay, so the first one is having a lack of drive, desire, and no libido. The second one I'll be talking about is how to go from gagging at your partner's socks being on the floor or having no attraction to your partner whatsoever to thinking that they're irresistible. How to overcome inhibitions. What if your partner's greatest desire is also your greatest inhibition? And how to get over sexual shame after growing up in a culture that has never discussed it or viewed it as dirty. Okay. How to ask for what you want without sounding like a creepy sex maniac. Okay. And what about sex after divorce? So, how do you decide on your values and your boundaries? Right. So, how do you know if you're ready and trying not to numb or hit the easy button because you know you're feeling lonely in that moment. So those are the questions that have been sent in, and that will be what I'll be answering today. So let's go back to the first one. The first one is having a lack of drive, desire, and no libido, right? So how do we begin to opening up this conversation with ourselves and opening up to more desire, right? And to have that drive to actually want to do it, so to speak. So what I would say in the work that I do, in the work of the internship, is really about, it's not a switch that just gets switched on. So we talk about the desire as an energy, right? So everything is an energy. So it's about tapping in and melting into the moment, because what happens in our nervous systems is when we are so wired to think about what we have to do throughout the day, what we have to do tomorrow. I've got such a big day tomorrow, so I have no desire to do it tonight. So all of these things, we're wrapped up in forward thinking. Our minds are so busy that there's no time and space for this desire to happen. So basically, we're depleted and we have no energy before we even show up, and let alone actually make it happen. So this is a really, I'll say easy, but it's simple, but it takes a conscious effort that we all need to be really aware of, right? So what I would say, what I teach my interns to do is tap into the energy of it, right? So if you've got any sort of morning devotion, or you need to, you want to understand that it's just an energy, and an energy can always be cultivated, right? So what we will teach inside the internship, or if you've done any work with me before, is the first thing that we do is learning how to tap in to pleasure and desire, and not look at it from external things. So at this point, we're not even looking at your partner. You're actually you're working within, and you're making the time to be with yourself, and you're learning how to cultivate that energy within. And that might be closing your eyes and just being present to your breath, right? You might bring to mind something that makes you feel really decadent and really beautiful. And what you do is you cultivate those feelings in your body. So what happens is it becomes an in-body experience, and you give yourself over to these feelings, right? So you just spend, it might be like 1 minute, 2 minutes, or 3 minutes. Ideally, you want to spend at least 3 minutes cultivating this feeling, giving yourself over to these feelings, because research shows that once you cultivate this energy, it will last up to 6 hours in your day, right? In the time that follows. So what you're doing is you're closing down your eyes, and you're becoming really present to your breath, and you're bringing to mind feelings that evoke strong feelings of pleasure, that decadence, that those internal feelings, and you're letting these feelings that are happening in your body, you're bringing your intention and attention to these feelings, and you're giving yourself over to them. So you're letting them build and amplify in your body, and then you're holding these feelings in your body. Once we do this, is we're able to understand, and we know how to cultivate this energy. Once we know how to cultivate the energy, then it builds the desire, right? So the lack of drive that you've been feeling, all of a sudden you have the drive, because what we do when we do that is we're increasing our capacity in our lives to experience desire. When we open up and we expand our capacity to experience pleasure and desire, the ripple effect of that is it actually generates and expands our ability, our emotional well-being, our physical well-being, our happiness, right? We're actually opening ourselves up to experience more joy in our lives, more creative thinking in our jobs. We show up and we're actually in flow, right? So everything becomes, you're looking at your days at life through a different gaze, which is one of the beautiful side effects of when we do this and we cultivate this energy of pleasure. So this is what I mean when Carl Jung has suggested that sexuality is nothing to do with sex and everything to do with psyche, right? So people would say, foreplay, like if you're in a traditional like husband and wife scenario type thing where, it's, if the husband wanted to have sex or make love with his wife that night, we would say that the foreplay starts in the morning, right? Or maybe try to do the dishes, because our interconnectivity between our minds and our erotic body is very close. We have to be stimulated mentally in order to open ourselves up physically to activate our sexuality and our erotic body. So that's what we say is foreplay starts as soon as you open your eyes, right? If we're talking about it in a relationship. Okay, so that is the first thing that I would say to open yourself up. So if you lack drive, tap into, and you're lacking desire and you have no libido, I would learn how to tap into and learn how to cultivate the energy of pleasure. I would say do this every single day for 3 minutes. And you will find that just tapping into this energy over time, it just continually opens you up, right? And not only will you want to have more sex, you will just feel so much better within your body, which is amazing. So this has more than one benefit. Okay, the next question I have is how to go from gagging at your partner's socks on the floor to thinking that they're absolutely irresistible, right? So sometimes when, let's say, the minor frustrations that we have in our relationship, it really, it makes it easy for us to switch off and see them as sexual beings, to have that sexual attraction towards our partner, because I'm so annoyed at you right now because you never ever pick up your towel off the bathroom floor, right? So our lifestyle living arrangements can actually have a side effect of lacking in desire to be intimate with our partner. So how do we fix this? How do we go from letting these minor things in our lifestyle, or little quirks or frustrations or little things that our partners do that annoy us, and flipping that switch into actually finding them absolutely irresistible? So the first thing I would, again, is understanding that, like, it's energy that we cultivate, right? So I would then, so not only then, so you're still, as I said earlier, is you're cultivating this energy within you. So it's less about them and more about you, because we can take responsibility for ourselves and only ourselves, right? They are responsible for their energy and you are responsible for yours. However, when we are in a connection in our partnership, we become codependent and we have this insecure attachment and this need for, you need to be this for me and you need to do this, say this, act like this, and be this person, right? But we need to give that to ourselves, okay? So that is our responsibility. We don't change them. We cultivate our own energy. So self-sovereignty first, right? So just acknowledging the fact that those annoyances says, not so much more, it says less about them and more about you and the connection you have to yourself and your dependency or codependency or your attachment style in your relationships, right? So what we want to do is really we want to begin to understand that those things, that sock or that towel on the bathroom floor, right? It doesn't change who they are as a person, right? It's if we bring in a sense of worship. So the first thing that I want to say is, when I talk about, we talk about in sacred kink is we talk about worship a lot, right? So we're in a sacred union with ourselves. So we are completely sovereign in our own being. What I mean by that, we are responsible for our own sacred union. When we are whole, when we make ourselves whole, when we do the work on ourselves, we don't feel the need to fix our partners, for them to be somebody else, because we feel whole. So we feel good, right? And then when we feel good, guess what happens is we begin to look at our partners differently, purely because we feel whole. And that makes all the difference in the world, right? And that might sound really crazy because you're so used to living with this frustration and these little things that happen in every relationship. But really, when we take control of our own energy, then, and we work on doing the work within ourselves, then we're not craving to be filled up by somebody else. So what happens, if you can imagine it like so, is, we're filling ourselves up with all this delicious energy, right? And we're becoming whole within our own being. So we're not craving that thing from somebody else to make us feel whole, right? So we have this outpouring of love that we can share and worship with somebody else, right? Another thing that we might do is begin to look at all the amazing things that they do, right? Like, is it that, like, they have a cheeky smile, or is it a body part that you love, or is it a part of their personality? Is it something that they do? So I would say build evidence, like look for things that you actually love about them, because often, and that might sound really stupid, but often we look for the things that drive us crazy in a relationship. But if we spend the same amount of time like admiring the things that they do that we love, because sometimes, especially if you're in a long-term relationship, those things that we love can be easily forgotten if we're not looking for them, because we're so annoyed because I picked up this towel or put that dish in the dishwasher or whatever it is. So it's these little nuances that we can experience, and often it's just we can flick the switch and the gaze in which we see the world, right? And then also in that is, and it really, this leans on again, is to that first question about if you're lacking in drive and lacking in libido, is look for things around you that activate pleasure in your system, right? So it might be like, and this might lean on whatever love language you are. So if you don't know your love language, I can put a link into below to find out your love language. Say, for example, if your love language is physical touch, right? You might look for an object, like, and I've just grabbed the first thing that's available here, is like, and touch, and you might just like close your eyes and feel that pleasure, and just allow yourself to feel how beautiful that material is, right? Or you might, if it's words of affirmation or something like that, right? So look for things that activate pleasure in, and desire and hedonism in your body, right? We want to make it an in-body experience, and often just slowing down and bringing presence into our everyday moments can really go a long way in how we open up our nervous systems and how we increase our capacity to feel more pleasure in our lives, because we've been brought up in a society where pleasure and hedonism is a dirty word, right? Is that it's this thing that we don't really need. But let me ask you this, is how different do your days look if you're really present and you have a sip of water and you feel the bottle and you actually feel the water going down your throat, right? How you feel when you brush past your partner with absolute presence and you've got that skin to skin contact, connection, that contact. Or if you say, I love you, right? When we bring absolute presence into our moment and we look for things that bring us pleasure and we allow this pleasure to just run through our veins, and we do that when we melt into the moment. Notice how all, like, what we're doing is not only do we feel amazing when we go through our days, no matter what we're doing, we're increasing our capacity to allow ourselves to feel pleasure. When we feel pleasure, we're more abundant. We feel more abundant. We open ourselves up to more opportunity. And yes, we want to have more intimacy in our lives, which is a beautiful thing. So that is something that you can do to move from resisting and repelling of your partner into making them absolutely irresistible. Okay. What is the next question? Oh, this is a juicy one. So the next question is how to overcome inhibitions, right? So I was saying in the opening, is inhibitions, when it comes to sexuality, really comes down to shame and suppression. Um, for women is our sexuality is, if you've got any sort of sexual appetite, you're classified as a slut, and we hold shame, and often we tie our self-worth into how many lovers we've had. And so we really want to break down this scaffolding and this framework that society has built up, that sex is a dirty word, or our mind is in the gutter, or all of these things, that the energy underneath is saying that sex is dirty, that sex is not something. And just understanding that men have been given an open slather of opportunity to sleep with whoever they want, whenever they want, and be classified as a stud. But where girls have not had that same upbringing, this has happened from generation to generation. So this is so deeply embedded in our ancestral line that we need to allow ourselves time to actually relax our nervous systems and to open up to this, right? And especially if you've got any, Catholic and Christianity are, some religions and cultures that have had so many taboos and so many rules about sex, particularly as women, that suppression in sexuality has been absolutely stunted because of this shame. So what we want to do is to begin this unraveling, is to begin to look at it beyond the landscape and the construct of the societal conditioning, right? So begin to understand that, as I said earlier, it is just energy, right? But as human beings, we're animals, right? And so a part of being an animal is having sexual desire. It is innate, it's in our primal instincts, right? That goes beyond all time and space, right? I was saying in, a module I was just teaching the apprentices before the show is, if you look at like all Greek mythology, all Roman mythology, all the Hindu goddesses and gods, like there's, before there was any religion, there's, sexuality has been celebrated in art, in literature. You look at some of those beautiful, those Greek and those Roman statues, right? And the artwork is that it's been celebrated for such a long time. However, what happened is when religion come into the mix, it becomes demonized and it becomes shamed. So this separation that we felt and this suppression that we felt, so for women it was shamed, and then for men it's an area where you have to go into this dark, seedy room where it's okay to express it, but you don't actually share it as a part of your existence. So you need to understand. So just begin to look beyond and just see it for what it is, the societal conditioning of what's been passed down from generation to generation. And I'll say that there's no quick fix to this. It's a gentle unraveling, but bringing your awareness to it makes a big difference, and that will continue to unravel before your eyes and in your being and in your nervous system. So I would say that with that, again, like, this is just a matter of, it's because a lot of it can feel numb, like you feel numb when it comes to this cultural shame and conditioning around sex. So with that numbness, sometimes you don't want to force it, right? You don't want to force it and you just want to get to the other side and you just want to be this sexually awakened being. Is that honor that sometimes it's a natural unfolding, right? So just allow this natural unfolding to take place. Sometimes, on the iceberg, the ice, it can be frozen. And so sometimes you need to massage that numbness in order to create your capacity. So basically what you're doing is you're creating more safety in your nervous system. So reinforcing the fact that you are safe. You are safe to open yourself up to feel more hedonism and feel more pleasure and more desire and more intimacy in your body. So you're reinforcing your body and your nervous system that you are safe, because what happens to our nervous system is because we feel unsafe, and when we feel unsafe, our nervous system shrinks, so to speak, and so we're not open and we're closed off. So what we want to do is we want to just softly unravel and open up. So you'll hear me say a lot is when we melt into the moment, when we make love to the moment, we are actually relaxing our nervous systems. We are saying, we are securing in our mind that we are safe. We are absolutely safe to be here. We are safe for this unraveling to take place. And coupled with cultivating the energy, and what we'll find, it'll be an activation of the erotic body that takes this beautiful journey and this natural evolution that doesn't need to be formed, because this natural unraveling will be a natural lubricant, and it will take on a journey of its own, and one that we do not want to control. Okay, so let's Okay, so how to come in okay, so I just spoke a lot about culture and shame, right? And it being viewed as dirty. Now, which was a question, and then but the original question that I just merged in. So let's talk about the inhibitions. So the inhibitions is to, what do I want to say to that? So often what happens is, so we have the desire to experience something. However, we feel our inhibitions, we stop ourselves from experience that thing. So what I'll say all the time is, our fear is not of pleasure. Our fear is of losing control. Who are we when we lose control? Because I don't want to lose control. And that is really the root of all inhibitions, right? So to be completely uninhibited with this is, yes, it's that soft unraveling and that reassurance of safety in our nervous system. But inhibitions, right? The thing about inhibitions is the desire is there, right? So you have the desire, you've cultivated the energy, but so that sticking point is actually acting on that desire, right? That's what we're speaking to with inhibitions. So it's not about you don't want it. It's about you want it, but you're too scared to act on it. So you go, okay, so what do I do when I act on it? So what we want to do is we want to surrender to the fear of what's on the other side, right? So just knowing that what's on the other side is you losing control, is not like you're on this big slippery slope where you're completely out of control. That's not going to happen. You're going to experience something that you've never experienced before. And if you weren't supposed to have experienced this thing, you wouldn't even have the desire in the first place. So that is worth understanding and keeping in mind, right? You weren't supposed to do it, you wouldn't have the desire. So sometimes, our desires, our internal desires, are breadcrumbs to our evolution. And there is a difference between external desire and internal desire. And that is something that we really need to understand. Okay, so how do we begin to act? So, something that I was saying in the call with the apprentices just earlier is, we were talking about kink and BDSM. And sometimes, we look at this, and you might go, okay, like becoming this, this activation of the erotic body and this intimacy, and you might want this. However, it feels too big, right? And that's the fear that's stopping you in these actions, is because the other side feels too big. So what you want to do is you want to like break it down into bite-sized chewable chunks, so to speak. So stop looking at the big picture and looking at the next step, right? So it might be, for example, it might be, so let's, so we're talking before, about BDSM. Now, you might want to go into BDSM, or you might be curious. However, the whole BDSM basket is very vast and it's very, very big. So the big picture here could really deter and create a lot of inaction, right? So what we want to do, so an entry point for so many people might be the bondage element, right? And this is just an example. So it might be something totally different, right? So it might be, I'm trying to think of another kind of way, so just think about the next step that doesn't feel so big for you, right? So it might be, I'm trying to think of something that is like really vanilla and mainstream. It might be, okay, so I really want to experience oral sex, right? But I fear, like there's fear there, and there's an action that stops you. So you go, okay, what if they just kiss my neck, right? What if they just, and you literally just continue, and it might not happen in one play or session of play, one act of intimacy. It might happen over a few, right? So what would happen is you're becoming more comfortable with, you start at the neck and then you're working your way down your body, and so it's unraveling at a pace that you feel really comfortable and really safe with. So don't look at like the whole end destination thing. Look at it as to what's the next thing that I can do that I feel really comfortable, right? Because so often, not just within our sexuality, within life, we're so focused on the finishing line, and that feels too big and too hard, so we don't even bother. But what is the next thing that we can do that will get us to this finishing point, right? Not that there is a finishing point, but that's a whole other thing. So what is the next best thing? So the biggest thing with inhibitions is to allow this natural unraveling. Stop looking at the big end goal and do the next thing that feels safe, right? So let me just have a feel into if there's anything else that wants to come up around inhibitions. On the flip side of that, you can see, a lot of people use drugs and alcohol so they become uninhibited, right? That is a huge thing that happens because we have, we there's alcohol and we do drugs. So because we have the desire to be uninhibited, we like who we are because we feel free, right? And so it's a matter of going, okay, how can I allow myself to experience this without the need for drugs and alcohol? And that is a journey that is really worth taking because the desire is there. It's just having that confidence to go about it as well. So it's really, really it's everything that we do inside the internship, to be honest. Okay, so the next question after that was, what happens if your partner's greatest desire is also your greatest inhibition? Okay, so in that, so in the body of work that we'll do, we'll talk about our kink profiles, right? So understanding your kink profiles, you can really begin to see whether you're compatible sexually with your partner. So, so you can see where you're aligned there. Now, to answer this question in its original form, is that desire, your partner's desire is your biggest inhibition, right? There's two things I want to say there. Is open communication, right? Open communication. So you might want to come up with a game plan. So in order for you to go, okay, I'm not just going to go, okay, yeah, boom, let's just go and do this thing, is work out a game plan for that to happen, right? So let's start off here or let's start off here and let's see what happens. We need some safe words, some open communication or some body cues, constant stream of open communication as to where you're at when this game plan is unfolding, right? The other thing that we need to take notice of is it a hard no or a soft no? So are you no way, like I'm not going there? Because that's a hard no. So then you go, okay, like you are just not ready. And you both need to honor that. So then in that, you go, okay, but what can we do inside that? That is a yes, right? So there's mutual respect and a conversation that's happening to bring both parties into alignment and into agreement to something that you're both comfortable with, right? On the flip side of that, there's a whole bunch of things that could happen, but depending on, like there's open relating, there's polyamorous relationships, there's avenues where the partner can go and experience that. However, I would, if you're in like a traditional monogamous relationship, then I would suggest the first, having that open communication and exploring the hard no and the hard yes and the soft yes and the soft no. So maybe I'm not sure about it, but I could enjoy it. I just haven't gone there yet. So it's this open communication that's happening and unraveling. So that's what I would say to that, because that is a really common one. It's a partner says, I really want to explore this. And the other partner's going, are you for real? You freak, right? So, but what we want to understand is that, like, first of all, is that all of these desires are beautiful, right? Desires are beautiful in all of their facets and however they're formed, because how they're formed is a combination of life experience from that's happened in early childhood to traumas to hidden kinks. Like there's this beautiful unfolding of events that's actually formed this desire and this kink to take place. So when we can see beauty in that, the rule of thumb is, I would say, is to be completely non-judgmental and begin to see the sacredness and the beauty and the courage that it takes to speak these desires and kinks or fetishes out loud. It takes courage for that to happen. So, I would say that don't just be completely like, ooh, is to go, I'm so grateful, like feel grateful that this open communication, that they feel safe enough, they trust you enough to share this with you, because it does take a lot of courage to say this out loud because society have shamed them for so long. So really what we want to do is dismantle the shame in that. Okay, let's have a look at, we have a couple of more questions. So the next one is how to ask for what you want without sounding like a creepy sex maniac. So again, like I kind of leaned on it just in, I'm noticing that each of these questions are really kind of like an evolution of the last one. So without sounding like speaking your desires, as I was just saying, is just remember that it takes courage. And this is an absolute game of trust, right? And I'll say in the internship and to my apprentices all the time is that we need to remember it's never about personal agenda or gain, and it's about benevolence, right? And when we come at it from this sense of sacred union and sacred worship, is what we do is we can just see each other. Yeah, we can understand the courage that it takes to speak to this, and it's a game of trust, right? So have absolute trust that, hey, open communication, and that might look like, I want to have a conversation about, where I want to go with some of my desires. I want to also acknowledge that I feel really exposed and vulnerable, and there's a part of me that feels worried about how you're going to judge me and see me after I share these with you. So just having that open communication by owning the fact, I don't want to be this creepy maniac that comes across like that, but I do actually just want to create the space for both of us to have this conversation, because I do think that it's important, and it does feel really important to me. Yeah. So just having that open communication. Yeah. So not just, kind of dumping it on, hey, I really want to do this, is, you would just, tell them what you need, right? As in, like, how, like, can you please be open? I really feel to share this with you. However, I'm fearful of da 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 da. Okay, so that is how I would approach it. Okay, honest communication. And you know what? The more we have these conversations, the less taboo it is, right? So nothing is off the table, because if we can get to the point where we can dismantle the shame and the societal conditioning and the constructs of this suppression of, of everything, and understanding that every single person on the planet has a kink profile, has a desire of some kind. Okay, so it's not 50 shades of fucked up. It just is, right? It just is. So we have this freedom to explore it without worrying what the other person thinks, because we can honor the beauty in how it's been formed, right? And honor the evolution, knowing that these kinks, the more we explore these desires, it is the evolution of our consciousness and growth as a human being, right? Okay, so sex after divorce. Now, this is a really good question, because, it's common, right? It's common. So the divorce rate is, I don't know what the divorce rate is. Is it 1 in 3? I want to say, but I could be totally wrong. So sex after divorce. So how do you decide what your values and boundaries are. Let's talk about that first. Okay, so the biggest thing that I would say here, and again, it leans on what I was talking about earlier, is understanding how we cultivate energy and pleasure and desire, right? The other thing that we really want to lean into is doing the work to make ourselves whole. So we're not relying on someone else to fill us up. So knowing your love language, knowing your kink profile, knowing what you need, knowing your attachment style, it really helps create values and like a framework for yourself that honors your evolution, that doesn't box you in. Okay. So I would say lean in to what do you need in this moment? What are you yearning for? Right? So I would spend time in desire and again tapping into that internal pleasure and cultivating that energy. And when you're in that, asking the question, like, what do I really desire right now? Right? What do I want to hold myself in these values, right? What are some of the boundaries or discernment that I want to feel, right? So what is turning you on and what is turning you off? It might come down to answering those two questions, right? What do I need in this moment? What am I hungering for? What is turning me on? What is turning me off? Yeah. What values do I need to put in place in order to honor myself in this process? Okay. So, how do you know if you're ready and not trying to numb or hit the easy button when it comes to feeling lonely, right? So, if you're recently divorced, like the lonely factor is, and I think there's over the past few years, we've really seen the increase in loneliness becoming a huge part of mental illness. So, how do we know if we just want to, like, take on the intimacy with someone else in order to not feel so lonely or to numb the pain that's there, right? So, what I would say to that is again that wholeness factor. But I would say that in this, so there's going to be a moment where you're going to explore, right? There'll be moments where you go, oh, I'm giving myself away, or oh, I'm trying to numb it, right? Or I'm trying to, yes, I'm lonely and I just want to feel this, right? Everything has a shadow. I think that that's probably worth saying here, is that everything has a false power, right? And it's up to us to be that have that self-awareness and that self-responsibility in order to know the differences when we're trying to numb it or when we're trying to just like I'm going to do this because I'm feeling really lonely. So I would say once you have your values and your boundaries in check, and the more you can cultivate that feeling of wholeness and cultivate those feelings of pleasure, you will know when you're trying to numb or just incorporate a quick fix, and when you're really honoring your body. So it really takes checking in, right? So I would talk about in the internship, I would talk about knowing when we're unavailable, and when we're unavailable, checking in with your soul, right? Checking in with your soul is, what is my soul hungering for? Am I craving to be available, or am I craving to be unavailable in this moment? And once we know what our soul is craving for, and we can act upon that, because too often is you know, particularly, you know, as men and women, you know, when we want to say yes, we say no. When we want to say no, we say yes, because we're trying to please other people all the time. And what this does in our bodies is it causes confusion, right? Because we're doing something that we really don't want to do, and that can like build resentment, disconnection, the feeling of separation, and the ripple effect of that is absolutely huge. So I would say is to honor your yes and honor your no, right? And you know, sometimes I even play with something that's really simple, and that is it a hell yeah or is it a hell no? Because if it's not a hell yeah, then it's a hell no, right? But often, sometimes it's like, oh, do you want to like come out for this drink? And you're like, no, maybe, and it's this like murky space in between. Do I want this or do I not want this? And so often, if the rule of thumb I'll take is if it's not a hell yeah, then it's a hell no. And so you're really using your discernment in that and honoring what you need in that moment. Okay, so I hope that that really helps you in your quest and in your journey. Let's just have a look to see if we have any questions that have come through since I began, because I've been on my own little tangent. So let's have a look. Okay. And I'm just cool. All right. Okay, beautiful. So if you have any other questions, let me know. I can absolutely come back and answer them for you. But just to kind of recap on all of it is understanding that it really just is energy, and opening up our capacity is really just assuring to our body that we are safe, and it's less about the other person or your partner in your relationship and more about yourself. So less trying to fix them and starting to connect in with your own desire and your own needs, right? Because what we look for in others, we are actually really yearning for within ourselves. And that is the rule of thumb that we really want to remember here, right? And so just the more we do this, the more compassion we can have, and the more we open ourselves up, and to know that it's nothing to be afraid of, it's nothing to be ashamed about. It just is, and it is absolutely beautiful, and we can celebrate it, right? It is a conversation worth having and continue to have. So it has been an honor to be with you today and share this with you and to answer your questions. I'm so happy to be of service in this way. And if you have any questions, if you're feeling like, I want to, what is this thing to like experience wholeness and to activate your erotic body, then reach out, because there are so many ways in which I can be of service to you. So please don't hesitate to reach out if you feel the call. So thank you for hanging out with me today, and I will see you next week back on the show. Have a great day, guys. Bye.